じゃ誰もがそうしてる天井のないエコルームに誰かが僕を放り込む君のスピードでもって同じフレーズを弾いて冷たい時に寄り添って
Man, that last section was a lot chunkier than I anticipated. Oh god, I can't wait to edit this. I'm gonna speed up the pace from here on out so that this video can't qualify as feature length. The Zoldyck family arc directly follows the Hunter exam and revolves around the group's quest to retrieve Killua from the clutches of his family. This arc is the first sign of what's to come in a sense, as it sees Kurapika and Leorio take the backseat so that Gon and Killua can drive the car. Terrible idea, by the way, don't let 12-year-olds drive. Just like in real life, however, if you put a child behind the wheel, the ride most likely won't be very long. This arc clocks in at exactly 5 chapters in the manga and 5 episodes in the anime, 4 not counting the recap episode at the end. Yeah, that's 2 recap episodes and 26 episodes if you're counting. This is technically an unofficial arc, as Togashi himself considers it to be part of the Hunter exam, but regardless of that, it contains its own new plotline, its own supporting cast, its own villains, and its own setting, so the entirety of the fanbase have basically come together to tell Togashi that he's wrong about his own work.
Hey! Look at me, sure. Look at me, sure. I'm the
author.
No.
Despite its alarmingly short length, this arc manages to be incredibly important for Killua as a character. The main idea that gets developed here is that of his upbringing and how it differs from Gon's. Neither of the two boys have had a particularly stellar relationship with their parents, but unlike Gon, Killua's mother and father were both present in his life. Present and horribly, horribly abusive. I mentioned earlier that Killua has undergone assassin training since the age of 3, but I didn't mention that a large part of that training was him being repeatedly poisoned, electrocuted, and beaten his entire life so that he would develop resistances to those forms of torture. In fact, when we actually get to see Killua in this arc, he's tied up and being repeatedly electrocuted and whipped by his older brother, Miluki, as punishment for running away from the family. Killua's lack of reaction to this whatsoever communicates just how much he's experienced this in his life. The abuse is so familiar that it fails to even be painful anymore. Awareness of Killua's abusive family illuminates a lot of his prior actions in the series. Throughout the entirety of the Hunter exam, Killua displays extreme violent tendencies on several different occasions. The way these outbursts are portrayed, especially in the anime, suggests that Killua has a bit of a split persona. I'm not suggesting that he actually suffers from multiple personality disorders of any kind, but instead suggesting that he is trying very hard to repress the violence baked into him by his upbringing. This leaves the normal and friendly Killua, as well as the abusive one that breaks out when he can no longer contain him. This tracks logically, as a large part of the reason he ran away from home in the first place was to escape their violent and suffocating ways. It makes a lot of sense that Killua would end up the way he did. Constant exposure to violence has a desensitizing effect, and there's a significant correlation between child abuse and becoming an abuser. As Kaufman and Ziegler outline in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry, the rate of abuse among individuals with a history of abuse is approximately 6 times higher than the base rate for abuse in the general population. I feel the need to be careful with this topic though, because I don't want to further the stigma that victims of child abuse are destined to become abusers themselves, which is absolutely not true. Even the scientific journal I just referenced goes on to state that most abuse victims don't become abusers, and that there are many other factors at play. In fact, a lot of the abused are able to live perfectly healthy lives while using their previous trauma as a motivator to improve, an idea that this series very much supports. I mainly felt the need to include this because I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea in the short term. This whole topic will be integral to Killua's character arc going forward, so keep it in mind. Structurally, Hunter x Hunter once again finds itself in a grand shonen tradition. This time, the rescue mission. This kind of plot usually comes a decent way into the story because they rely on having time beforehand to build up the relationship between the rescuer and the rescuee. As an example, the Soul Society arc in Bleach only works because the audience believes that Ichigo cares enough about Rukia to take on an entire society for her. With Hunter x Hunter though, Gon and Killua haven't really had that much screen time together as of yet. Sure, their dynamic is fun to watch, but it's kinda hard to believe that somebody would go through this much effort for someone they just met. So what is it that makes this arc work? Well, nothing, really. At least at first. I'll fully admit that I wasn't really into this arc when I first started it, mainly for the reasons I just said. I'm gonna mostly discuss the manga version here, so just know that basically everything I say applies to the anime as well. The first 2/3 of the story revolve around Gon and his friends just trying to get into the Zoldyck home. Turns out their assassin money was able to buy them an entire mountain that they then outfitted with a multi-layered outer gate that weighs several tons. The only way to enter the property without being massacred by the family pet is to open the gate, so Gon, Kurapika, and Leorio spend the first 2 chapters training to do so. About 3 weeks pass by in these 2 chapters, and it's all just kind of okay. Once they get inside and meet Canary is when it starts to come together. Canary is one of the Zoldyck butlers, who happens to be around the same age as Killua. The 3rd chapter is entirely taken up by a standoff that occurs when she is sent by Killua's mother to stop the other characters from reaching the house. This is where we see Gon's 3rd major moment of recklessness almost to the point of suicide, as he repeatedly tries to pass Canary only to be clubbed by her cane. Her beatings become more reluctant and pained as it becomes more and more clear how sincere Gon's feelings towards Killua are. She eventually ceases her efforts entirely, begging Gon to save Killua before she's attacked by the matriarch of the family. At this point it became clear to me that unlike a normal rescue mission motivated by a strong relationship, this one is motivated by equally strong worldviews. Remember that Killua returned to his family of his own will. This is because when Illumi's presence caused him to kill his opponent during the exam, he started to believe that it was truly impossible for him to escape his family's influence. He ended his quest to have fun and make friends because he truly believed that he couldn't change. If Gon were any normal person, this arc would never occur, but Gon's sheltered life has left him with a supreme sense of indignation. To other people, Killua's life is just an unfortunate reality, but to Gon, it's an affront to all that's right in the world. The fact that Killua was deprived of the happiness that every child deserves makes no sense to him, so he takes it upon himself to fix it. Although Gon will not always be an aspirational protagonist, he's at his most admirable here. His emotions are so pure and innocent that he even manages to convince Killua that he was wrong about himself. We don't catch up with him until the 4th chapter, but once we do, we see that he's resigned himself to his fate. This changes once he hears that his friends have followed him this entire way. This is probably the first time anyone has actually genuinely expressed care towards him, convincing him that perhaps he truly can leave his old life behind and become a better person. This arc ends with Killua's father overruling the rest of the family and letting him go with his friends. This contrasts how Silva Zoldyck was built up throughout the story, portraying him as a loving father instead of a cold abuser, but it's very clear that he has ulterior motives for his actions. The group of main characters briefly reunite before heading their separate ways to pursue their own goals. It's goodbye for now, but not forever. Each of the 4 agree to meet in the creatively named York New City on September 1st, the date that Hisoka told Kurapika to be there on if he wanted information on the Phantom Troop. This is where Gon plans to end his rivalry with Hisoka by besting him in combat, reclaiming his pride in the process. The supporting cast here is mainly composed of 3 Zoldyck butlers, Canary, Godo, and the Gatekeeper. There's also this guy, but I don't really have anything to say on him. The Gatekeeper serves his role well enough, and Canary is great for the short time she's around, but Godo's coin game mostly feels just like a waste of time. I would honestly cut him if he wasn't important later in the story. I would say these guys are a downgrade from the last supporting cast, but their screen time is so minimal that I don't really think that would be fair. As far as villains go, this arc fares decently well. No one member of the Zoldyck family receives that much development as an antagonist. Instead, they act as a unit and manage to be pretty compelling together. There's a deeply uncomfortable duality to their family dynamic, with them seeing their abuse as a form of love and their violence as a source of familial pride. I'm especially a fan of how proud Killua's mother is when he stares at her with an incredible amount of murderous intent. It's equal parts amusing and disturbing. I do wish that individual members got fleshed out more, though. It's fine that characters like Silva and Zeno get minimal time to shine, as they'll have plenty later on in the series, but Kikyo and especially Kaluto are begging for a stronger foundation. I also think it's a bit weird that Illumi doesn't appear at all, despite being the main reason the story even occurred, but he's so prevalent throughout the future arcs that it once again doesn't really matter. Overall, this arc is short and sweet. One thing I will say though is that I think I had more fun analyzing it than actually experiencing it. There's a lot of great character building to dig into here, but it goes by so quickly in real time that its importance isn't really properly conveyed to the audience. A lot of it is also subtextual, so you may come away with the impression that the storyline is a waste of time if you don't stop to think about it for a while. Another problem here is very poor pacing in the anime. The manga version is incredibly snappy, but even at 4 episodes, the anime version just feels slow and stretched out. But regardless, the show must go on.